All right, buckle up, everyone, because we're diving headfirst into a world that's usually shrouded in mystery. We're talking ethical hacking,
Yeah,
but don't worry, you don't need to be some kind of a tech genius or wear a hoodie to follow along.
definitely not.
Today, we're breaking down a beginner's guide to ethical hacking, and trust me, even if you've never written a line of code in your life, you're going to find some seriously valuable insights here.
Our goal.
We're talking the tools, the techniques, even the mindset that makes this field so fascinating.
Absolutely.
So get ready to decode the world of ethical hacking.
Yeah. One of the first things we really need to do is, clear up what ethical hacking actually is.
Right.
Because the word hacking kind of gets thrown around a lot,
It does, yeah.
and it usually has some negative vibes attached to it.
For sure.
But ethical hacking, or white hat hacking, as some people call it, is all about finding vulnerabilities, but with permission.
So it's authorized.
Exactly.
Like you've been invited to break in, but all for the sake of making things more secure.
Yeah, think of it like a security audit, where you've been given the green light to try to break in, find those weak points, and then help fix them.
So basically, you're like a digital detective. But instead of my magnifying glass, you've got a laptop and a whole bunch of awesome cyber tools.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And I'm guessing these skills are pretty in demand these days.
Oh, absolutely. As our world relies more and more on technology, the need for ethical hackers just keeps growing.
That makes sense. You know, I have to admit, when I first started reading up on this stuff, I was a little intimidated by all the tech jargon.
Oh, I hear you. It can definitely feel overwhelming.
Networking, Linux, firewalls.
Yeah,
It's like learning a whole new language.
it is. It is a bit like that,
Yeah.
but that's the beauty of ethical hacking. You can pick it up as you go. You don't have to know everything all at once.
Okay, that's encouraging.
Let's start with something that's pretty fundamental.
Okay.
Networking. Just imagine the internet as this giant, sprawling city
Okay, I like that.
with buildings everywhere, and each building represents a device.
Like my phone.
Exactly. Your phone, your computer, servers, everything. And every single device in this city has a unique address, an IP address, that lets it send and receive information.
Okay, so kind of like a digital postal system where each device has its own specific address for deliveries and sending stuff out.
That's a really good analogy.
Yeah.
But how does the information actually travel?
Yeah, like are we talking tiny little digital mail trucks zipping around this city?
Not quite mail trucks, but the analogy works. Think of protocols as the rules of the road for data. Just like traffic signals and road signs keep things moving smoothly in a real city, protocols like TCP/IP, they make sure the data gets packaged up correctly
Sent to the right place.
and to the right place and received without any mix-ups.
Gotcha. So it's not just about knowing the addresses, but also understanding how the whole system works, the language, and the rules of the road, so to speak.
You got it. And speaking of language, let's talk about Linux.
Ah, yes, Linux. It seems like it's every ethical hacker's best friend. Why is that?
Well, Linux is a really powerful operating system, and it's a favorite among ethical hackers for a bunch of reasons.
Okay.
First, it's open source, which means the code is publicly available. Anyone can see it, study it, change it.
So it's kind of like having the blueprint for our digital city.
Yeah, exactly. You can see how everything is connected, identify any potential weak spots. Plus, this transparency actually makes it more secure.
Because more eyes are on it looking for those vulnerabilities.
That's right. And the second thing is, Linux is incredibly versatile and customizable. You can tailor it to fit your specific needs.
Oh, so there's like a Linux flavor for everyone.
You could say that. There are tons of different distributions for all sorts of tasks.
But isn't Linux like notoriously difficult to use? I mean, I always picture lines of code scrolling down a black screen. I don't even know where I'd begin.
I know. It can seem a bit intimidating at first, but honestly, it's not as bad as you think.
Okay.
There are distributions like Ubuntu that are made to be super user-friendly, even if you're a complete beginner.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And once you get the hang of it, you start feeling like you're speaking fluent hacker.
Yeah, exactly. You start to feel pretty cool, actually.
I bet. So speaking of hacker lingo, can you give me a taste? Like, what's a simple Linux command that I could use?
Sure. Let's start with ls.
Okay.
That stands for list. If you type ls in the command line, it'll show you all the files and directories in your current location.
So it's kind of like opening a folder on your computer and seeing what's inside.
Yep, exactly. You're basically peeking into your digital neighborhood.
Gotcha. Pretty straightforward.
And another basic command is cd, short for change directory.
Okay.
That one lets you move around through the file system like you're walking from one building to another in our internet city.
Okay, I like these analogies. They're helping to make this all feel less scary.
Good.
Hmm.
Because learning shouldn't be intimidating. It should be exciting.
Agreed. So we've talked about networking, we've got a little taste of Linux, but what about coding? Do I need to be like a programming whiz to be an ethical hacker?
While you don't need to be a coding guru, understanding the basics of programming is a huge advantage.
Okay, so I don't need to be a master coder, but knowing a little bit can definitely help me out.
Yeah, it lets you understand how software works, how it can be manipulated, and how to automate tasks.
Oh, that's interesting. So if we're sticking with our city analogy, it's like learning the building codes of our digital city.
Uh-huh, yeah. You can see how those structures are put together and maybe even spot where someone cut a few corners.
I like it. Okay, so what are some of the programming languages that are particularly useful for ethical hackers?
All right, well, there are three big ones that stand out: Python, JavaScript, and Bash.
All right, let's start with Python. What's that all about?
So Python is incredibly versatile, plus it's relatively easy to learn. It's used for everything from automating tasks to building custom hacking tools.
So it's like the Swiss Army knife of the ethical hacking world.
Yeah, exactly. It can do a little bit of everything.
Very cool. Okay, what about JavaScript?
So JavaScript is mainly used for web development, which makes it essential for understanding and testing web applications. And nowadays, those are, well, prime targets for attacks.
Right, because they're often the entry point to all sorts of sensitive information.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got Python and JavaScript. Last but not least, what about Bash?
Bash scripting. That's all about automation within the Linux environment.
Okay.
It's like writing up a set of instructions for your computer to follow automatically.
Oh, so it saves you time and effort, makes things more efficient?
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
It's like having a team of little digital assistants working behind the scenes to carry out your instructions.
Okay, I love it. So we've laid the groundwork with networking, dipped our toes into Linux, and even gotten a taste of the power of coding. But now I'm really curious about how ethical hackers actually find those vulnerabilities in the first place. It's like they have this sixth sense for spotting weak spots.
It's true. It's a skill that develops over time.
So how do they do it? What's their secret?
Well, it all starts with the art of scanning and enumeration, which is a bit like detective work. Yeah, think of a detective meticulously combing through a crime scene for clues, fingerprints, footprints, anything that might help them crack the case.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
That's essentially what ethical hackers do when they scan and enumerate a network. They're searching for open ports, running services, any little piece of information that could point to a vulnerability.
So they're building a detailed map of the digital landscape, basically identifying potential entry points and weak spots.
Exactly. It's all about reconnaissance, gathering intel to understand the lay of the land.
Okay, this is getting exciting. So what kind of tools do they use for this detective work? Are there any, must-have gadgets in their arsenal?
Oh, for sure. Two essential tools for any ethical hacker are Nmap and Wireshark. Nmap is a powerful network scanner that lets you discover all sorts of things about a network, like the hosts and services that are running on it.
So Nmap is kind of like sending out a recon team to get the big picture of the digital terrain.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And then you have Wireshark.
Okay, tell me about Wireshark. What does that do?
So Wireshark is a network analyzer, which means it allows you to capture and inspect the actual data packets that are traveling across the network.
Okay, so if Nmap shows us the traffic flow on a map, Wireshark is like zooming in and seeing what's inside each car.
That's the perfect way to visualize it. Wireshark gives you this really deep dive into the communication that's happening between different devices.
Okay, so that sounds pretty powerful.
It is. And together, these tools provide the raw data that ethical hackers need to move on to the next crucial stage: vulnerability analysis.
Vulnerability analysis. It sounds a bit intimidating.
Maybe a little, but it's where things really start to get interesting. Vulnerability analysis is all about identifying those weaknesses in a system, those cracks in the armor that could potentially be exploited by attackers.
So we're getting into the nitty-gritty here, the real detective work.
Exactly. Ethical hackers use a combination of automated tools and their own expertise to uncover these vulnerabilities. They're looking for anything that could compromise a system's security.
Okay, what kind of tools are we talking about here? Give me some examples.
One of the most popular vulnerability scanners is Nessus. It's kind of like an X-ray machine for your network. It can scan systems for known vulnerabilities like missing patches or outdated software.
Oh, so Nessus helps you find the low-hanging fruit, the vulnerabilities that are easiest to exploit.
Yep, that's a good way to think about it.
Ah.
It helps prioritize which weak points need immediate attention. And to guide ethical hackers even further, there's a valuable resource called the OWASP Top 10.
OWASP Top 10, I've heard that name before. What is it exactly?
It's a list compiled by the Open Web Application Security Project, and it highlights the 10 most critical web application security risks.
Ah, so it's like the most wanted list of web vulnerabilities, the ones that are most likely to be targeted by attackers.
That's exactly it. It's constantly being updated, too, so it reflects the latest trends in web application security.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've talked about scanning, enumeration, and vulnerability analysis. It feels like we're building a pretty solid foundation for ethical hacking. But what happens next? What do you do once you've identified those vulnerabilities? That's where the real action starts, right?
It does. It's where things can get a bit more delicate. The next step is ethical exploitation.
Ethical exploitation? That sounds like a bit of an oxymoron. How can exploitation be ethical?
It's all about responsible and controlled simulation of real-world attacks. You see if those vulnerabilities can actually be exploited and test the effectiveness of any security measures that are already in place.
Oh, so it's like a controlled experiment.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful tools for this is something called Metasploit.
Metasploit. That name has a certain gravitas to it. It sounds pretty intense.
You could say that. It's a penetration testing framework, and it comes with a whole library of exploits, payloads, and auxiliary modules that you can use to simulate attacks. It's like a virtual testing ground where you can safely experiment with different attack techniques.
So it's a safe space for ethical hackers to unleash their skills without actually causing any real damage.
Precisely. The goal of ethical exploitation is to improve security, to find and fix weaknesses, before someone with malicious intentions can exploit them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's like a preemptive strike against potential cyber attacks.
Yeah.
But how do you make sure that ethical hackers are actually staying within the bounds of ethical and legal practices, especially when they're simulating these attacks?
That's a great question, and it's where the white hat part really comes in. Ethical hackers follow a very strict code of conduct.
Right, like a set of rules to keep things ethical.
Exactly. They always have to get permission before testing any system, and they have to be completely transparent about their methods and what they find.
So it's not just about the technical skills, it's also about integrity and responsibility.
Absolutely. And that's why certifications like the Certified Ethical Hacker, CEH, and Offensive Security Certified Professional, OSCP, are so valuable. They demonstrate a commitment to ethical practices.
So they're like a badge of honor, showing that you're not just skilled, but also trustworthy.
Precisely. They show potential employers that you know what you're doing and that you'll use your knowledge responsibly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about the tools and techniques, the mindset, the ethical considerations. It's been a lot to absorb, but really fascinating. But what about actually putting all of this knowledge into practice? How do people who are just starting out actually get some hands-on experience in ethical hacking? It's not like you can just start hacking into random websites, right?
No, definitely not. But there are safe and fun ways to practice and hone your skills. One of the best is through something called Capture the Flag Challenges, or CTFs for short.
Capture the flag. That sounds way more exciting than reading a textbook.
They're a lot of fun. CTF challenges are like online treasure hunts specifically designed for ethical hackers. You're given a series of challenges that test your hacking skills, and the goal is to find hidden flags within a system.
Flags, like clues.
Exactly. They represent vulnerabilities or successful exploits. It's a great way to put your knowledge to the test in a safe, controlled environment.
So you get to apply all the stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's like a digital playground for practicing your hacking skills. And there are tons of platforms like Hack the Box, TryHackMe, and PicoCTF that host these challenges. They have a wide range of difficulty levels too, so there's something for everyone, from beginners to more experienced hackers.
Wow, so it's like a real-life video game for ethical hackers.
You could say that. They're really engaging and a great way to learn from your mistakes. And speaking of hands-on practice, there's another crucial aspect to becoming an ethical hacker that we should talk about. Building your own home lab.
Home lab. Now that sounds intriguing. Are we talking like beakers and Bunsen burners here?
Not quite. But it is a similar concept. In the context of ethical hacking, a home lab is a secure and controlled environment where you can practice your skills without any risk of causing harm to real systems. You essentially create a simulated network that's all yours to experiment on.
So it's like having your own digital playground where you can practice your hacking skills without worrying about breaking any laws or causing any damage.
Exactly. You can set up different operating systems, applications, entire networks, all within your own computer. It's a fantastic way to really get your hands dirty and learn by doing.
Okay, I'm definitely starting to see the appeal of having a home lab. It's like a private training ground where you can hone your skills without any real-world consequences. But how do you even set one up? It sounds pretty technical.
It's actually a lot easier than you might think. You don't need any fancy equipment, just a decent computer and some free disk space. You can use virtualization software like VirtualBox or VMware to create virtual machines, which are like self-contained digital environments.
Virtual machines, those are like those little digital containers we talked about earlier, right?
Yes, exactly. You can install different operating systems and software on each one, just like you would on a physical computer, but without affecting your main system.
Okay, so it's like having multiple computers all running on one machine. That's pretty cool. And what kind of things can you do with a home lab?
Oh, the possibilities are endless. You can practice everything from basic networking and Linux commands to more advanced techniques like penetration testing and ethical exploitation.
So it's like having a personalized ethical hacking boot camp right at your fingertips.
Exactly. And to make things even more realistic, there are websites like VulnHub that offer pre-built vulnerable virtual machines.
Volhub, we've heard that name before.
Yeah, we talked about it earlier with those TTF challenges. They're like these little digital puzzles, each designed to simulate a specific real-world security scenario. You can download them and practice your skills against them.
So it's like having a collection of virtual target dummies that you can test your hacking skills on.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And with a home lab, you can really push your limits and experiment without worrying about breaking anything important. It's a fantastic way to get hands-on experience and build confidence in your abilities.
Okay, I'm totally convinced I need to start building my own home lab. But before we get carried away with all this talk about hacking, I think it's important to remember the ethical considerations, right? I mean, we are talking about breaking into systems, even if it's just for practice.
You're absolutely right. The ethical part of ethical hacking is absolutely crucial. It's all about operating within the law, respecting privacy, and never causing harm. There are very clear guidelines that every ethical hacker has to follow.
So it's not just about having the technical skills, but also about having the integrity and judgment to use those skills responsibly.
Precisely. It's about having a strong moral compass. Ethical hackers have a responsibility to use their knowledge for good, to protect systems and data, and to help make the digital world a safer place.
That's a powerful message. So listeners, if you're feeling inspired to dive into the world of ethical hacking, remember that with great power comes great responsibility. Always use your skills for good, respect the law, and never stop learning. And stay tuned for the next part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some of the specific areas where ethical hackers are making a real difference in the world. We'll be right back after a short break.
Welcome back, everyone, to our deep dive into the world of ethical hacking. Before the break, we were talking about the importance of hands-on experience, and one of the best ways to get that is by building your own home lab.
Yeah, home lab. It sounds kind of intimidating, to be honest. Like, do I need a bunch of expensive equipment and like a dedicated room in my house for this?
Not at all. It's actually a lot simpler than you might think. You don't need a whole server farm. A decent computer and some free disk space are a good starting point.
Okay, that's good to know. My laptop's feeling a little less inadequate now, so what's the next step?
The key is virtualization software, something like VirtualBox or VMware.
Virtualization software, what does that do?
Well, it lets you create these things called virtual machines.
Virtual machines, right? We've touched on those before.
Yeah, they're like self-contained digital environments that run on top of your existing operating system. You can install different operating systems and software on them, just like you would on a real computer, but they're completely isolated.
So it's like having multiple computers all running on one machine.
Exactly. You could have one virtual machine running Windows, another running Linux, another running a specific web application that you want to test, all without affecting your main system.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So I can experiment with different operating systems and software without messing up my actual computer?
Yep, that's the beauty of it. It's a safe and controlled environment where you can make mistakes, try new things, and really push your limits without any real-world consequences.
So if I mess something up, I can just start over with a fresh virtual machine. No harm done.
Exactly. And you can even take snapshots of your virtual machines, which are like save points, so you can easily go back to a previous state if something goes wrong.
That's awesome. It sounds like virtual machines are the perfect tool for ethical hackers who are just starting out and want to experiment in a safe environment.
They are. And to make things even more interesting, there are websites like VulnHub that offer a huge library of pre-built vulnerable virtual machines.
Hub, yeah, we talked about that earlier with the capture the flag challenges.
Right. These VMs are designed to simulate real-world security scenarios. They have specific vulnerabilities that you can practice exploiting.
So it's like having a collection of target dummies that you can practice your hacking skills on.
You got it. It's a great way to apply what you're learning in a controlled environment and get some real hands-on experience.
Okay, so Home Labs and VulnHub. They sound like essential tools for any aspiring ethical hacker. But with all this talk about hacking and exploiting vulnerabilities, we need to remember the ethical part, right?
Absolutely. The ethical in ethical hacking is not just a fancy title. It's a core principle that guides everything we do.
So it's not just about having the technical skills, but also about using those skills responsibly.
Exactly. Ethical hackers are bound by a strict code of conduct. First and foremost, we always have to obtain explicit permission before testing any system.
So no hacking into your neighbor's Wi-Fi just for fun.
Definitely not. We have to respect people's privacy and property. And we always need to be transparent about our methods and findings. We document everything and share our results with the system owners so they can fix the vulnerabilities.
So it's like a collaboration. You're working with the system owner to make things more secure, not trying to expose them or cause any harm.
That's right. It's all about making the digital world a safer place for everyone. And that brings us to another important aspect of ethical hacking: certifications.
Certifications? Like a diploma that says, I'm a certified ethical hacker.
Pretty much. There are a few well-respected certifications in the industry, like the Certified Ethical Hacker, or CEH, and the Offensive Security Certified Professional, or OSCP.
Okay, so why are these certifications so important?
Well, for one thing, they validate your knowledge and skills. They show potential employers that you have a solid understanding of ethical hacking principles and techniques.
I think it's like a seal of approval showing that you know what you're doing.
Exactly. And they also demonstrate your commitment to ethical practices. These certifications require you to adhere to a strict code of conduct and to use your knowledge responsibly.
So it's not just about knowing how to hack, but also about knowing how to hack ethically.
That's the key. The CEH, for example, covers a wide range of topics, from footprinting and reconnaissance to vulnerability analysis, malware analysis, social engineering, and even cryptography.
Wow, that sounds pretty comprehensive. And what about the OSCP? What makes that one special?
The OSCP is known for its intense, hands-on exam. Imagine you're given 24 hours to penetrate a simulated network and document all your findings. It's a real test of your practical hacking skills.
Wow, that's like a real-life ethical hacking mission compressed into a 24-hour challenge.
It is. It's demanding. But for those who are serious about a career in penetration testing, it's a highly sought-after certification.
Okay, so CEH and OSCP, those are the two big names to remember if you're thinking about pursuing a career in ethical hacking. But certifications are just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Right. It's not just about the credentials. It's about having the passion, the curiosity, and the drive to constantly learn and improve. The world of cybersecurity is constantly evolving, so ethical hackers need to be adaptable and always willing to expand their knowledge.
It's like a never-ending quest for knowledge.
Exactly. And it's what makes this field so exciting. There's always something new to learn, a new challenge to tackle, a new way to make the digital world a safer place.
Well, we've talked about home labs, certifications, the ethical considerations. But what about the actual work that ethical hackers do? I mean, what does a day in the life of an ethical hacker actually look like? Where do they fit into the grand scheme of things?
That's a great question. Ethical hackers work in a variety of settings, from large corporations to government agencies to small businesses, and their roles can be just as diverse.
So it's not just about sitting in a dark room typing code all day.
Not necessarily. Some ethical hackers specialize in penetration testing, where they simulate attacks to identify vulnerabilities in a system. Others focus on vulnerability research, where they dig deep into code and systems to find weaknesses before they can be exploited. And some even work on incident response, helping organizations recover from cyber attacks.
Wow, that's a wide range of possibilities. So if someone is interested in a career in ethical hacking, where's a good place to start?
Well, building a strong foundation is key.
Yeah.
Get comfortable with networking, Linux, and at least one programming language like Typhon.
Sounds like we've covered a lot of those bases already.
We have. And don't underestimate the value of hands-on experience. Build your own home lab, participate in Capture the Flag challenges, and get involved in the cybersecurity community. There are tons of online forums, groups, and conferences where you can connect with other ethical hackers, learn from experts, and even find mentors.
It's like you're joining a secret society, but instead of secret handshakes, you're trading hacking tips and vulnerability reports.
Huh, you could say that. The ethical hacking community is incredibly welcoming and supportive. It's a great place to learn, grow, and make a real difference.
Well, after this deep dive into the world of ethical hacking, I'm feeling both excited and a bit overwhelmed, to be honest. It's a complex and challenging field, but it's also incredibly important and rewarding.
I agree. It's a field that demands a lot, but it also gives back so much. It's about more than just technical skills. It's about using your knowledge for good, protecting people and organizations from harm, and making the digital world a safer place.
Okay, listeners, before we wrap things up, I have to ask, what's one thing about ethical hacking that most people don't know, something that might surprise them?
That's a good question. I think most people don't realize how much creativity is involved in ethical hacking.
Creativity. Really? I always thought of it as a very technical, logical field.
It is, but finding and exploiting vulnerabilities often requires thinking outside the box, coming up with innovative approaches, and seeing things that others might miss. It's like solving a puzzle, but the puzzle is constantly changing.
That's fascinating. So ethical hackers aren't just following a set of rules or a script. They're constantly adapting and innovating. It's more like an art form than a science.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so challenging and rewarding. It's a field where you never stop learning and where you can constantly push your boundaries.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this episode of our deep dive into the world of ethical hacking. We've explored the mindset, the tools, the techniques, the ethical considerations, and the incredible opportunities that this field has to offer.
We've only scratched the surface, but hopefully we've sparked your curiosity and inspired you to learn more.
Absolutely. If you're looking for a career that's challenging, rewarding, and constantly evolving, ethical hacking might just be the perfect fit for you.
And even if you're not planning to become an ethical hacker, understanding the basics of cybersecurity is essential for everyone in today's digital world.
So go out there, explore, learn, and remember, hack responsibly.
Until next time. Welcome back to our deep dive, everyone. We've covered so much ground already. We've talked about the mindset of an ethical hacker, the tools they use, the skills they need. But I think it's time to really drive home the importance of getting your hands dirty, of actually putting all this knowledge into practice.
Absolutely. And what better way to do that than with a home lab?
Exactly. A home lab is like your own personal cybersecurity playground. It's a safe and controlled environment where you can experiment, push your boundaries, and make mistakes without any real-world consequences.
Right, because in the real world, one wrong move could bring down a whole system, or worse. So a home lab lets you kind of try out those moves, see what works, what doesn't, without causing any real damage.
Exactly. You can try out different hacking techniques, test your defenses, see how different systems react to different attacks. It's all about learning by doing.
So how do we get started with this home lab? I have to admit, it still sounds a little intimidating to me. Like, do I need a whole bunch of servers and fancy equipment?
Not at all.
Yeah.
You really don't need anything too fancy to get started. A decent computer with some extra RAM and storage space is a good start. The real magic happens with virtualization software.
Okay, virtualization software, that's what lets you create those virtual machines, right?
Oh, precisely.
Yeah.
Virtual machines, or VMs for short, are like little self-contained computers that run on top of your existing operating system. You can install different operating systems on them, different software, and even configure them to be vulnerable to specific attacks.
So it's like having multiple computers in one. I can have a Windows VM, a Linux VM, and even a VM that's specifically designed to be hacked.
Exactly. And the best part is, these virtual machines are completely isolated from your main system. So if you do something that crashes one of them, it won't affect your actual computer.
Okay, that's a huge relief. I'm not the most tech-savvy person, so knowing that I can experiment without risking my entire computer is very reassuring. So I can install different operating systems, different software, but where do I get these vulnerable virtual machines? Do I have to build them myself?
That's the beauty of it. You don't have to. There are websites like VulnHub that have a huge library of pre-built vulnerable VMs.
VulnHub. That name rings a bell.
Yeah, we talked about them earlier when we were discussing Capture the Flag challenges.
Huh.
They have a ton of VMs that are specifically designed to be hacked, each with its own unique set of vulnerabilities.
So it's like having a collection of target dummies that I can practice my hacking skills on.
You got it. And the great thing about these vulnerable VMs is that they simulate real-world security scenarios. So you're not just learning abstract concepts, you're actually getting hands-on experience with the kinds of vulnerabilities that ethical hackers encounter in the field.
That's awesome. So with a home lab and some vulnerable VMs from VulnHub, I can basically set up my own personal hacking range where I can practice my skills without any real-world consequences.
Exactly. And that's the key to becoming a successful ethical hacker. It's not enough to just know the theory. You need to get your hands dirty, experiment, make mistakes, and learn from them.
I completely agree, and I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners as well. Ethical hacking is a field that's all about continuous learning and growth.
Absolutely. The landscape of cybersecurity is constantly evolving, so ethical hackers need to be adaptable, resourceful, and always willing to push their boundaries. It's not a job for the faint of heart, but it's incredibly rewarding to know that you're making a real difference in the world.
Well said. And with that, I think it's time to wrap up this incredible deep dive into the world of ethical hacking. We've covered so much ground, from the basics of networking and Linux to the intricacies of penetration testing and vulnerability analysis. We've explored the tools, the techniques, and the ethical considerations that make this field so fascinating and important.
And hopefully we've inspired some of you to explore this world a little further.
Absolutely. Whether you're considering a career in ethical hacking or simply want to be a more informed digital citizen, the knowledge and skills you gain from this journey can be incredibly empowering. So go forth, experiment, explore, and always remember, hack responsibly.
And stay curious. The world of cybersecurity is vast and ever-changing, so never stop learning and never stop pushing yourself to be better.
Until next time, happy hacking!